How's it going, everyone? I am back with another video. This is going to be a different type of video than what I'm used to making. Obviously, it's the off season, so can't do my videos I'm used to going over my weekly picks, predictions, break down the week, things like that. In this video, I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be doing a rankings video. Jesus, I don't know why I just struggled so much to find the wording for that. I'm going to be doing a rankings video ranking the starting quarterbacks from this past season. Not all of them. Obviously, there was a bunch outside of the, standard 1 through 32 because of injuries and, things like that. But pretty much, I'm going to be ranking the starting quarterbacks for each team this past season on how I thought they performed pretty much. So it's going to be from 1 to 32, from left to right. So eventually, when I plug all these guys in, my top quarterback will be, top left, and my bottom quarterback, my number 32 ranked quarterback, will be, all the way down on the right. Hopefully that makes sense. Once it's filled in, I think it'll be easier to see. I'll preface by saying that this isn't necessarily, like who I think is going to be the best quarterbacks going into next season. It may be in some cases, but maybe not, every case. It's just strictly how I think these quarterbacks played purely from the 2024 NFL season. Um, I guess I kind of factored in, I don't know. I didn't really factor in playoffs too much because obviously a lot of these guys didn't make the playoffs. The top ones, most of them did, but actually pretty much all of them did, at least on my list. But I kind of just mostly based it off regular season. I guess playoffs maybe a little bit, but then that would kind of disqualify, the guys that didn't make the playoffs, which in part might have been due to their play. And also I'll say that again, obviously I mentioned there's more than 32 starting quarterbacks. Pretty much, if it how do I phrase this? If I had done, every starting quarterback, I think there's like 50 something in total this season. So I just did 1 through 32. Obviously, you get some unique cases, like for instance, like good old Gardner Minshew Magic here. I believe he only started 8 games. Aiden O'Connell only started 8 games, and then they had Desmond Ritter start one against the Falcons. Uh, Minshew was their starting quarterback going into the year, so that's kind of how I prefaced him over Aiden O'Connell. Even though I think you can probably argue Aiden O'Connell played better than Gardner Minshew. Russell Wilson, for example, obviously he didn't start the year. I think Justin Fields started the first 5 games, if I remember right. But Russell Wilson started a majority of them. Kind of same thing with Drake May. So hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, Tua missed a bunch of games due to injury, but obviously he started a majority of them. So pretty much the guys that are either the starting quarterback going into the year or started most of the games is kind of the one, even though they didn't play all the games, is the ones I included in my 1 through 32 list. Kirk Cousins, another one. Bryce Young obviously got benched. He's another one. Hopefully that makes sense the way I described it. Derek Carr, that's another one. Richardson, what the hell is Richardson on here? There he is. That's another one. Hopefully that makes sense the way I described it. Even Trevor Lawrence, my old guy, Mac Jones, subbed in for him. Hopefully that makes sense. But I will pretty much get into the list here. And again, strictly based off the 2024 season. And again, not necessarily who I think is going to be the best quarterback going into next year for the future, anything like that. Just strictly based off this past season. So I'm going to go from bottom to top here. Pause. So from 32 to 1, or in other words, worst to best, last to first, however you want to phrase it. So yeah, I will start off here. So the quarterback that I believe had the starting quarterback that I believe had the worst 2024 season was where the hell is he? Oh, there he is. Mr. Massage Watson, as I call him, not Sean Watson, Massage Watson. It seems like maybe Massage Watson was too busy, maybe tutoring Justin Tucker on the side, than actually trying to participate, trying to win games for his team. I mean, Deshaun Watson was just god awful this year. It is actually hard to comprehend how awful Deshaun Watson this year, but last year he wasn't great. And he came back from 2022. The last couple games he played the Browns, he was not good, but at least he had the rust excuse. He was off for a long time up to that period, but he's just been awful. I mean, it was actually hard to comprehend how awful he was this past year. I mean, Stephen A. Smith said it best when uh, on First Take he said something along the lines of, if you wanted to arrest Deshaun Watson for being awful, I don't think anyone would contest you for it. I mean, it's just he's just been bad. And yes, the Browns offensive line, and he didn't play too many games. Obviously, he got hurt, about I think I want to say somewhere between like the halfway or the quarter way and halfway point in the season. And the Browns offensive line was kind of a disaster. So that obviously didn't help, but he was just not good. He just did not look good this season. It's just hard to believe the fall off he's had. I mean, his first couple years in the league, he was in the MVP conversation. He's balling out. 2020, he led the league in passing yards, if I remember right, even though the Texans were awful that year. I mean, his first couple years in the league, he completely balled out. He looked like the top, not he was the first overall pick, but he looked like the first round top 10 pick that he was. I believe he was taken number 10, if I'm not mistaken. But he's just been absolutely awful. Obviously, he tore his Achilles. So you never want to see a player get hurt. Obviously, his off the field antics, all the questions, controversy there. That's why Joe call him Massage Watson. Um, but yeah, just again, you don't want to wish anyone to get hurt, but and it probably sounds bad the way I'm saying this, and I'm not saying I'm glad he got hurt or anything like that, but you don't wish for anyone to get hurt. He's got all his off the field stuff. Um, I'm not trying to say like I guess it happened to if it happens to anyone, I guess it's deservingly happened to this guy. That's not what I'm trying to say. Not really sure how to phrase what I'm saying here. But yeah, never want to see a player get hurt, go down. But just Deshaun Watson, it's just kind of fitting. Just can't catch a break. It seems like and playing awful. He got hurt last year, missed a good part of the year. Got hurt this year, missed a good part of the year. Just declining play year after year. Just criticism, controversy, mounting, injuries mounting. Just not good for Deshaun Watson. And literally, like the one positive about Deshaun Watson this year was against the Eagles. This is when the Eagles were kind of struggling; they weren't playing too great. He actually, I think the second half, he was like 10 of 10, something like that. It looked like okay, maybe he's finally getting to semi former Deshaun Watson form. And I think he looked half decent against the Bengals the following week, and then that's when he tore his Achilles. I think that was the following week at least. So yeah, just Deshaun Watson can't get a break. Got his off the field stuff, just declining play, just not great for Deshaun Watson. I have him ranked as out of these guys the worst starting quarterback this past season. Number 31 on my list is Mr. Gardner Minshew. And again, Gardner Minshew's kind of a weird case. He started 8 games. Aiden O'Connell started 8 games, and Ritter started one. But Minshew is obviously not very good this year. I think he was better than Watson, but that's not setting the bar very high. Boy. Yeah, Gardner Minshew has struggled this year. Had a lot of turnovers, kind of some questionable passes. He did have some moments where he looked pretty good, like that Baltimore game week 2 when they came back to win that game. It's like a yearly thing. He goes into Baltimore, pulls off the upset he did 2 years ago with the Colts. Yeah, I mean, he looked good in that game, but he just did not play very well this year. Obviously, I mean, he was benched for Aiden O'Connell. I think 2 separate times. All right, well, I think once, yeah, okay. If I remember right, first time was because of performance. Second time he got hurt. So obviously the second time, out of his control, getting hurt. But he was not very good this year. I think they were maybe he started 9 games. I think he might have started 9 games. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was 8 games, but I think he only won 2 games if I remember right. And I think obviously they lost week one. They won week two. I think they were 2-2. So then he went on a losing streak. Yeah, he just struggled this year, made a lot of questionable, passes. Was like, Jesus, the Raiders offense was bad. They fired Luke Getsy, I think, after that Cincy loss. Yeah, tough year for Gardner Minshew. Kind of questionable going into the year, but him and Aiden O'Connell battling. And I mentioned Aiden O'Connell. I think Aiden O'Connell obviously didn't play great. I think he probably played better than Gardner Minshew this season, honestly. And he's definitely not their franchise guy, Aiden O'Connell, but he has shown some potential. He's had a couple games where he's looked half decent at least. But yeah, Gardner Minshew, he's a fun guy to root for. Minshew Magic. But yeah, unfortunately for him, I have him at number 31 on my list here. Um, Number 30, there he is. All right, so this is when, oopsies. Nope, want to move. Okay, come on. There we go. Number 30, I have Anthony Richardson. Maybe this is when my list starts to get a bit controversial. Some people might have Richardson higher. Anthony Richardson played not god awful, but he did not play well this season. He had, I believe, if I remember right, under a 50% completion percentage as a starting quarterback, and he started a majority of the games for the Colts. I think he had more picks than touchdowns. His passer rating was not good. I mean, his completion percentage was just, it's historically bad. I think it was like the worst for, a quarterback in how many starts he had in NFL history. And Anthony Richardson has so much potential. We've seen it. I mean, some throws, it's like someone I saw in a comment section. It's like he either throws a pass, or it's like, how is this guy in the NFL? Where it's like, this guy might be the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. It's like you're gonna get one of those every time he makes a pass. It seems like he was benched for good old Joe Flacco, who Joe Flacco's been fun to watch. He's slinging it at 39 still. He's still balling out. As a Patriots fan, obviously Joe Flacco, big rival when he was at the Ravens, but always have respected Joe Flacco. Um, but yeah, Richardson obviously got benched. He, shortly won the starting gig back. He looked good. Briefly at a nice comeback win against the Jets. He beat my team, which pissed me off when he did the take the L dance. Because I really believe we outplayed them, and they certainly got lucky to win that game. And Christian Barmore was blatantly dragged from behind on the 2-point conversion. Otherwise, he probably would have stuffed Richardson, and we would have won the game. But that's okay. That's besides the point here. Richardson just did not play well. He has so much potential, though. It looks like they're certainly keeping him on the roster. They're trying about bringing in a veteran QB to, compete for the starting gig with him. But yeah, so much potential, just struggling to put it together, consistently at least. Just, yeah, accuracy issues, but, we've seen the potential, asking to be subbed out of the game, never seen a quarterback do that. Just a lot of potential for Richardson, but he's just struggled to put it together consistently. After Anthony Richardson, I have, where the hell is he? I can't find him. Okay, hang on. Why can I not find this guy? Please tell me I have him on. Oh, there he is. Mr. Will Levis, Mr. Mayonnaise Man. I mean, Will Levis did not play great this season, but at least Will Levis had, and the Titans were bad this season, but at least Will Levis had some moments where he looked good. He played good when they upset the Texans in Houston. He played a good game. He at least had some moments this season, some games where he looked half decent. Obviously, he had a bunch of turnovers. He was getting memed for his, all his turnover plays and, all the faces he had. He was like a weekly meme for a couple weeks there. I had a lot of questionable plays, but he's shown potential too. I even see some Titans fans that want to keep Will Levis and build off of him. I don't think they're going to. I mean, maybe they'll keep him, but I don't think they're going to, keep him as their franchise guy. He certainly played better in his rookie year, I think, than he did last year. Yeah, Will Levis didn't play too great, but at least he showed, some potential, I guess is a good way to put it. Um, who is, oh, here we go. Looking at my note card here. Jesus. Oh, there he is. Danny Dimes. Danny Dimes coming in next. Oh boy, Daniel Jones. Now, actually, most people actually probably might have Richardson in front of these guys, or at least Levis in front of Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, to me, obviously did not play good this year, but I thought the Giants absolutely did him dirty. I mean, he obviously did not play good, but I don't think he was the main problem with that team. I mean, their quarterback play got significantly worse once they, released him. And obviously, he had the Giants had backups outside of him. So that's why outside of the one game Drew Lock against the Colts, Drew Lock like randomly just balled out that game. Their quarterback play was horrible outside of that game from Drew Lock. Daniel Jones, he showed some potential this year. At least he looked half decent, through some of the games. He played good against Seattle, and they were down neighbors that game. He had a really good game against the Seahawks in Seattle with that really good Mike McDaniel defense. He played good. He showed some potential being a half decent starting quarterback. Obviously, he's not nearly worth his contract. That was a horrible contract, especially now that they released him. It looks even worse. Even when they signed him to that, I'm like, yep, like many people, I'm like, yep, that's probably not a very good contract there. But yeah, Daniel Jones, I thought, at least consistently was a little bit better than Levis and Richardson. Obviously, where the hell is he going to go? That's a question. Now he's on the Vikings practice squad. I even see some rumblings that maybe the Vikings will keep him. But obviously, I don't think he's their franchise guy. But Daniel Jones, going to be interesting to see what happens with him. But I have him slightly ahead of Levis and Richardson here. Um, Here we go. Next on the list, if I can put him here. There we go. I get good old Trevor Lawrence. Oh boy, talk about potential. Every year it's like, all right, Trevor Lawrence, this is the year. He looks like the first overall pick, and he really has not been able to perform to that level consistently. The Jags, I was a bit higher on the Jags than most people going into the year. I think I had them at 9-8. They were one of the top teams in the league, a season ago for a good part of it. I believe they were 7-3, and then they only won 2 games after that. They finished 9-8, missed out on the playoffs. Maybe they were even 8. I think they were 8-3 actually, and then they lost out. Besides, they shut the Panthers out, which that was the year the Panthers were god awful. I think they went 2-15. And yeah, Trevor Lawrence was even hurt for that game. They had CJ Beathard in at quarterback that game. But yeah, Trevor Lawrence obviously not a great year this year. He got hurt. Mac Jones played a good amount of games for them. Just the Jags were a mess this year, kind of a disaster. But Trevor Lawrence had some games. He looked half decent, like that Houston game, even though they lost. That Philly game, it was a disaster start, but he came back. They nearly won that game. He at least had some moments. I think he overall played better than the guys, I have listed below him. That sounds obvious because I have Trevor Lawrence ahead of them. But yeah, again, I don't think the bar is too high. I don't think any of these guys played very well this season. But yeah, I have Trevor Lawrence listed there. I think Liam Cohen's a good fit for him. You know, I don't know. I do feel like next year Trevor Lawrence takes a step up, but you would like to see him playing at a higher level than he has been. Just every year, again, I mentioned it earlier. It's like, when is Trevor Lawrence going to show that potential? You know, Maybe that's next year, but you would like to ideally see it sooner. But anyway, I had Trevor Lawrence listed here. Where is this next guy? There he is. There we go. Okay, Derek Carr I have listed in front of Trevor Lawrence. So stats wise, if you look, Derek Carr is, ahead of these guys by a pretty good margin. However, that's kind of a bit misleading because if you remember the first 2 weeks of the season, the Saints, it looked like they were the greatest offense in NFL history. And I believe Derek Carr threw 5 touchdowns through those 2 games. The rest of the season, I believe he had, I want to say 10 touchdowns in 8 games, something like that. Obviously that's not god awful, but that's, just a little over a touchdown a game. That's probably not going to get the job done. And again, the Saints were just absolutely kill with injuries. That's a part of it too. But Derek Carr, I feel like outside of those first 2 weeks, didn't play too great. Obviously, he got hurt, late in the year. They kind of Cinderella's room at quarterback. Jake Hayner started. They had not Desmond Ritter. Jesus, why am I completely blanking on his name? The rookie. Why the hell am I completely blanking on his name? All right, yep. Now this is driving me absolutely insane. Hang on here. Why am I completely blanking on his name? Um. Okay, yep. Hang on. I gotta look this up. I don't know why I'm completely blanking on his name. Spencer Rattler. Okay, yes, I was looking it up, just randomly remembered. Spencer Rattler. Obviously, he didn't play too great either. Derek Carr, obviously, out of those guys, is the better of the three. Derek Carr, I always think is underrated. But next year I think he'll be a good fit with Kellen Moore, assuming they keep him. It looks like that's the direction they're going. I don't think the Saints are going to be a good team next year. I think Derek Carr will have a decent season under Kellen Moore. It seems like he's gotten hurt a decent amount. Obviously, he's getting older, up there in age. He's going to stay healthy. But yeah, Derek Carr just felt like after those first 2 weeks, consistently kind of struggled. Maybe that Falcons game early on he played good in, but outside of that, it didn't feel like he played too great. Maybe that Panthers game, even though they lost the second one, he played a solid game. But yeah, just outside those first 2 weeks, not too great from Derek Carr, I don't think. Excuse me here. Okay, here. This might be a controversial pick. I'm putting Dak this low on the list, which is kind of crazy, considering all the money he's getting paid. I mean, Dak did not look good this year, and that's putting it lightly. And yes, obviously he missed a good amount of games. I believe he only played 8 games. They were 3-5 in the games he played. Their offense was just bad, and a lot of his stats came not necessarily in garbage time, but when they were down, multiple scores, and I think the teams took their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. Maybe play conservative, prevent type defense. That's where a lot of his touchdowns, passing yards came from, I believe. For example, the Ravens game, they were down big late. Dak ended up getting a bunch of yards and touchdowns in. They had a couple chances to get the ball back. So that's again wasn't necessarily garbage time, but the Ravens I think took their foot off the gas a bit. Same with the Niners game. He had some yards and touchdowns he piled up late there. But, like that Detroit game, they were awful. I mean, their offense, honestly, it feels like their offense got better after Dak got hurt. And I'm not saying Dak was the problem. I certainly believe he's a better quarterback than Cooper Rush. But Cooper Rush, you can make an argument, played better than Dak this season. It feels like their offense clicked after Dak went down. Maybe outside of that, obviously that first Philly game, their offense was god awful. But after that game, it feels like maybe their offense clicked a little bit. And again, I'm not saying Dak was the problem. If he was there, it probably would have, been even better than it was. But yeah, Dak just did not look good to me this year. And again, new coach next year, Brian Schottenheimer. He was technically the OC last year. It was Mike McCarthy calling the plays, running the offense. So maybe a bit of an adjustment for Dak. Who knows? Cowboys don't have a lot of money, so it seems like they're going to, stick with a similar roster than they have. They didn't have, the receivers were kind of an issue last year outside of Lamb. It's kind of been an issue for years, it feels like, with them. So that'll be interesting to see how Dak looks next year coming off the injury, but he did not look too great to me this year, which is why I have him down this far. Next guy on the list, good old Captain Kirk. Now, again, statistically, Derek Carr should be ahead of both of these guys. I mean, the thing is, stats can sometimes be misleading. Kirk Cousins was putting together a pretty solid year until the collapse when they were 6-3, And then, they just collapsed pretty much, and their offense and Kirk kind of fell off a cliff. I believe Kirk Cousins only threw one touchdown the rest of the games he started, threw a bunch of interceptions. He just looked awful. He looked like an old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear, and he was benched. I think he had 18 touchdowns, 16 picks. Obviously, that's not a very good ratio. But again, they were 6-3. He had a couple good games. That Tampa game they won in overtime in Thursday Night Football, he balled out. He had over 500 yards. He was super clutch in the Week 2 game against the Eagles. Drove him right down the field to win the game through the touchdown pass to I believe it was Drake London. I'm pretty sure if I remember right. Um, yeah, he had a couple good games. He had over 400 passing yards in one of them. Oh God, which I want to say was against the Panthers, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, Ritter, I thought looked, or not. Why do I keep saying Desmond Ritter? Michael Penix, I thought looked pretty good when in his limited playing time towards the end of the year after they benched Kirk. But Kirk, obviously, the way he ended the year, he would probably be, right down there with, where I had Minshew and Watson. I would probably still put him in front of Watson, honestly, the way he ended the year. And poor Deshaun. I used to be such a big Deshaun Watson fan too, but just Jesus God, he has fell off so bad. But yeah, no, I just got sidetracked. But yeah, the way he played the first half of the season, he was balling out pretty much. Maybe not balling out, but he was having a really good year. But combined with the way he ended the year, kind of has him down here for me. And a lot of questions about his future. Where's he going to end up? Getting that big contract. Now he's benched. Looks horrible on the Falcons part. So a lot of questions to Kirk Cousins. I have him down here. Who is next on my list? Oh, here's an interesting one. Bryce Young. Now, kind of the opposite of Kirk Cousins. Bryce Young to start the year was actually god awful. I would probably the way Bryce Young started this year, I would probably have him below Deshaun Watson. He was benched, and he came back this back half of the year, and he looked really, really solid. He looked like a top pick the back half of the year. He balled out the last week of the year. In overtime, they put up 40 plus against the Falcons. He balled out against Philly. I don't think statistically he had a fantastic game, but he had a really good game against Philly. Nearly came back. Leggett dropped dropped. It was an incomplete pass, and he was wide open for a touchdown in that game. Maybe they would have won that game, but I think there was still a decent amount of time left. Philly probably would have at least gone into field goal range. So and the Pins defense got awful. So there's a good chance they would have lost anyway. But besides the point here, my point is Bryce Young had a really good back half of the year after he was benched. He looked maybe not phenomenal. He looked very much improved, and I was very impressed with what I saw with Bryce Young the back half of the year. And again, kind of the opposite of Kirk Cousins' season. The first half of the year, Kirk Cousins played really good. Bryce Young played awful. The back half of the year, Kirk Cousins played awful. Bryce Young played really good. I think overall Bryce Young had a better year than Kirk Cousins, and maybe the statistics don't show that. And again, something to I haven't mentioned it yet. I don't believe at least something to account for, at least that I did, is the help and coaching, things like that, the help they're getting. Kirk Cousins has a far better receiving core than Bryce Young, for example. And again, that you don't want to maybe the argument against is you don't want to knock the player for having better help. They can't really control that unless they do something like take a pay cut. You can argue to help build a better team around them. But I still think Bryce Young had a better year. Maybe I counted for that a little bit. That I think Kirk Cousins might have had some more help, but I was just more impressed with Bryce Young this year than Kirk Cousins overall. Very interested in how Bryce Young looks next year. Obviously ended the season on a high note. Where is my next? There he is. Well, technically before Bryce Young, I have Caleb Williams. Oh boy, Caleb Williams. Oh boy, a lot of different opinions on Caleb Williams this year. I think everyone agrees he obviously didn't ball out, have a fantastic year, but a lot of people pointing to the coaching, the supporting cast. I was just talking about help. Obviously, the Bears' offensive line was an absolute dumpster fire. I think their offensive coaching, at least to start the year, Shane Waldron was a dumpster fire. It got better with Thomas Brown calling the plays, which it still wasn't very great, I don't think. But hey, I got Thomas Brown on my staff, the Patriots, so very happy with that hire. Um, uh, just got sidetracked again here. That was I saying? Oh, yes, supporting cast. But Caleb Williams had DJ Moore, he had Keenan Allen, he had Cole Kmet, he had Swift. I mean, Adunze. I mean, he had a pretty good receiving core. Their offense was just awful pretty much the whole year. Again, I think got at least a little better after Shane Waldron was fired. And Caleb Williams had some moments. He had some bright spots. They kind of found a patch, a couple games in where their offense was clicking, and they were or no, sorry, believe they were 4-3. And then that Hail Mary, which I didn't think it was going to ruin their season, it looked like it did. They didn't win a single game, at least that I don't think they won a single game outside of that after that Hail Mary, except the last week against the Packers. Um, but yeah, Caleb Williams got sacked obviously a historic amount of times. The line was just awful. A lot of accuracy issues, some wild throws, not some questionable turnovers. The good thing is he didn't turn the ball over too much. I believe I want to say he had like 20 touchdowns, 6 picks. That's a pretty good ratio, especially for a rookie. But again, maybe a bit of a misleading stat because he was not great completion percentage wise, at least that I think off the top of my head. Kind of had a lot of wild throws, but he had a lot of bright moments. Still, a lot of potential. I think he's going to have a really good year next year with Ben Johnson. I think that's a really good match. Dylan, who I did the podcast with, said it was a match made in heaven. That's a good way to phrase it, I think. Yeah, a lot of people think Caleb Williams is already a boss. Some people are super optimistic about him. I'm kind of in the middle. Okay, I shouldn't say in the middle. I certainly don't think he's a boss, but I don't think he's going to be, like a top 5 quarterback or anything like that. I think he'll be a respectable quarterback next season, putting up good numbers, but not like trending towards like the elite conversation, if that makes any sense. But yeah, Caleb Williams, I kind of, again, don't have him. I sort of have him in the middle on my list here, but not kind of in the bottom half of it, kind of like just below mid. I don't think Caleb Williams played great this year. He had some bright spots, but again, I like what I saw from parts of his season, but a lot of work to do. Think he'll have a better year next year. But yeah, Caleb Williams, I have him ranked here. Here he is. Oh, okay. So now, wait on. Okay, Caleb, you to go behind Aaron there. All right, so yep, now it's trying to take form a bit. My list, second row going on here. I have Aaron Rodgers ranked slightly ahead of Caleb Williams. Now, Aaron Rodgers, the talk about him this year is he's washed, he's done, not an elite quarterback, should just retire. Obviously, the Jets were a complete disaster and a complete dumpster fire this year. I actually can't believe how bad their season was. Rodgers did not play great this year by any means, of course. His age definitely showed a bit. He had uncharacteristic off accuracy throws. He turned over a bit more than he usually does, threw less touchdowns than he usually does. But he actually finished with a better touchdown to pick ratio than I was expecting. I want to say he had 20 something touchdowns, like 11 picks, something like that. Obviously, maybe 8 picks. It was something like that. It wasn't great, but well, for his standards at least, but it wasn't awful. And again, I don't want to go purely off stats here. A lot of this is just based off my eye test, pretty much. Excuse me here. A lot of this is just based off my eye test, my opinions. Of course, stats take at least, some part in my rankings here. A lot of stats I kind of just have loosely not memorized, but like rough ballpark estimates in my head at least. But yeah, Rodgers, obviously, he had a lot of help this season. The Jets defense, after they fired Saul, which, by the way, which is absolutely ridiculous, especially that early on in the season, their defense took a bit of a dip. It looked awful some games, but it was still pretty solid for most of the season. Their offense was not very good. Uh, and they even traded for Adams. They reunited them. Rodgers had Adams. He pretty much had his own offense how he wanted it, and the offense still very much was lackluster this year. Rodgers had a couple of games where he looked, like classic Aaron Rodgers. He looked really good in those games, but for most of the season, it was just a disaster. Just did not look very good. But he had at least a couple games where he looked like good old Aaron Rodgers. Where is he going to end up next season? Who knows? It certainly doesn't look like he's going to retire. Obviously, not with the Jets. They announced that they're parting ways with him, so that'll be an interesting fit. See where Aaron Rodgers goes. I still think Aaron Rodgers can have a good, I think he could have a good season still if he continues to play. Obviously, a good part of that depends, or a good amount of that depends where he plays. I don't think he'll be, putting up his MVP numbers, but I think he could have, a half decent, respectable season at least wherever he goes next. I think he has that potential. Just the Jets were just not it this year, but Rodgers didn't play great. But I still have him in front of these guys. Well, that was a voice crack. There he is. Here we go. Here we go. I am putting my guy, Drake May, right in front of Rodgers. Okay, now I actually went back and forth on these two guys. I originally had Rodgers in front of May, and I switched it. A lot of these are kind of interchangeable, you can argue. But maybe I'm a bit biased as a Patriots fan, but I loved what I saw from Drake May this year. Statistically, May didn't light it up. I believe he had 15 touchdowns. I want to say 10 picks. Obviously, you'd like to see less interceptions than that. But May, I was very impressed this year. He looked like a very good quarterback. And again, you don't want to say stats aside, but just to my eye test told me May is a really good quarterback. Maybe it's because I'm numb to the point of how bad our quarterback play has been since Brady left, outside of Mac Jones his rookie year. Um, so maybe my bias is blinding me a bit here. And again, I mentioned the help factor. Drake May had none. Our offensive line was, I honestly think you can probably make an argument it was the worst offensive line in the history of the NFL. I don't think it is, but you can probably make an argument it was. Just a disaster, just shifting practice squad guys in and out. We had like 10 plus different starting combinations, just an absolute disaster. Alex Van Pelt actually didn't think was as bad as a lot of Patriots fans thought. I mean, he definitely had play calls where I was like, bro, like, what the fuck are we doing here? But, I didn't think he was as bad as a lot of Patriots fans thought he was. If we would have kept him, I honestly would have been, I guess okay is the good word, but if we let him go, I'm fine with that too, especially with Josh McDaniels back. I think that's certainly an upgrade. If I was told, all right, well, you're firing Van Pelt, but you're getting Josh McDaniels, I'm like, yep, done. Do it very quickly in a heartbeat. Okay, maybe that's a little over exaggerated in a heartbeat, but you guys know what I mean, hopefully. But yeah, Alex Van Pelt, I didn't think was as bad. I would have been fine if we kept him, honestly. But at least as maybe not as the offensive coordinator, but maybe as an offensive assistant, the quarterback coach, because I think he actually did a really good job developing May. Our offense was awful with Brissett in there. I believe it was literally ranked dead last, number 32 in the league. I mean, it was certainly better with May. May brings the the scrambling ability, and Brissett can scramble too, but obviously not as elusive as May. I'm sure age plays a factor in that. Brissett's a bit older. I believe what he's 31, 32, I believe, something like that. But yeah, May, his scrambling ability is really good. I believe he would just came up of Mike Vick's record for the most yards per carry by a rookie quarterback. Maybe he broke it. You know what? I'm gonna look that up now while I have it in mind before I forget about it. Um, let's see here. Oh, he did. He did. Let's see. Yep. Okay. Oh, and actually, not just a rookie record. It was the most yards per carry for a quarterback in a season since 2000. He had 9.1. Vic had 8.5. So he did break Mike Vick's record. So good for Jake May. Happy. Wow, I didn't know that. I thought he came up short. Now I'm happy. I'll look that up. Excuse me here. Yeah, scrambling very impressive. We barely ran any keepers. I believe the first keeper we ran was against Buffalo, the first of the two matchups, and it was super late. We were down 10, and we finally ran one of, I believe it was 4th and 1. We ran a read option. I'm like, why did it take that long? Like, again, going back to Alex St. Pelt, probably should have called more of those with May in there. But yeah, improvised scrambles. May was really good. Passing, I was very impressed. Threaded the needle a lot, made some impressive throws. Got a big arm, big deep ball. Obviously, again, he's not perfect. He, had a lot of flaws. Had some moments where, made some rookie mistakes. He looked like a rookie. But again, supporting cast, you can make an argument. We had the worst receiving core in the league. I think certainly we had the worst offensive line in the league. And, coaching wasn't too great either. So, combine all those, I think May overall, at least with my eye test, had a slightly better season than Rodgers. Statistically, Rodgers did, but I overall think May had a better season, at least according to my eye test. Super optimistic about Drake May. We got McDaniels. I think we're going to be good next year. Not to get ahead of myself here. Um, where is my next guy? There he is. Danger Russ Wilson. Danger Russ. Russell Wilson's kind of a weird one. He started off really good. He wasn't lighting up the box score, anything like that, but the Steelers only lost one game with him for a good amount of time. That was that weird snow game in Cleveland. But again, Thursday night game, division rival on the road. Steelers have a tendency to play down to their opponent in games like that. But yeah, the Steelers just simply won with Russell Wilson when he first started. And again, Wilson wasn't lighting up the box score with their offense was far better than it has been in years with Russell Wilson in there. Obviously, excuse me, a lot of controversy with Justin Fields. He was playing pretty good too. I believe they were 4-1 his 5 starts. When he got benched for Russell Wilson, a lot of people, questioning that move. And you can argue it paid off for the Steelers, at least in the short term. However, the back half of the season, their offense was not very good at all. And Russell Wilson very much struggled. They finished the season on a losing streak. They got blown out. Technically, they only lost, I think, by 2 scores against the Ravens. But, they pretty much got blown out in that game. They just looked bad the back half of the year. Russell Wilson very much struggled. But, put everything together. And, honestly, now that I'm talking about it, I'm tempted to just put Drake May in front of Russell Wilson, but I'll keep my list consistent here. Or maybe not consistent, but the same, I mean. But yeah, Russell Wilson, up and down season. Kind of a theme among some of the guys I've, talked about, placed on my list here. But yeah, Russell Wilson, good. Again, kind of similar to Kirk Cousins, kind of a better first half of the year and fell off the back half of the year. He didn't fall off as bad as Kirk Cousins did the back half of the year. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see what they do at quarterback with, Russ and Justin Fields both being free agents. They at least want one back, apparently. Russell Wilson said they're negotiating the contract like a couple weeks ago, but then there's rumors saying they want to keep Fields. So who the hell knows what they're going to do? I don't think they're going to be able to re-sign both of them, or if Justin Fields would want to re-sign there as the backup. So who the hell knows what they're going to do there? I do think Russell Wilson is a good fit for the Steelers, but maybe they should just go at Justin Fields. In the end, kind of a small sample size, only 5 games, but he looked pretty good. Obviously, he's a lot younger. They can develop him. And we saw Russell Wilson, small sample size, he looked great and then fell off. To me, that happens again with Fields. You can argue. Who knows? No one knows what they're going to do. We'll just have to wait and see. But I have Russell Wilson here in my rankings. Excuse me. Take a sip of water here. There we go. Okay. Next on my list, I have Tua. I'll just start. I've never been a big Tua fan. Statistically, I guess outside of his rookie year, maybe, I guess at least statistically since he got Mike McDaniel, he's been a really good quarterback. You can maybe even argue a top 10 quarterback. This year, I actually thought Tua was pretty good for the most part when he was in there. Maybe outside of a few games. Obviously, that Buffalo game week 2 was a disaster. He didn't play too great week 1 against the Jags either. That game against Houston was not very good either. Had 3 picks. The defense kept keeping them in that game. That was a crucial game for them to, for their playoff lives. And still, they nearly made it after that. Didn't eliminate them or anything like that. But it's a big game for their playoff lives. Tua kind of blew it a bit, it felt like. But their offense was obviously a lot better with Tua in there than out. And again, obviously Tua not being in there, you're gonna need a backup quarterback, and backups, are backups for a reason. They're worse than the starter, at least like 99% of the time. Maybe slightly less than that, but you guys get the point, hopefully. Obviously their offense was a lot better with Tua in there, very much struggled without him. Huntley looked decent at, points when he had to sub in for Tua. But, offense was pretty good with Tua in there. I definitely is taking a step back from the past 2 seasons. Their offense, it felt like a bit. But Tua, I thought, played pretty good, pretty consistent for the most part when he was in there. I have him in front of these quarterbacks. I obviously think he played better than these guys this season. Just injuries. Just injuries. Always been the thing with Tua. Got to stay healthy. But yeah, I thought Tua played good for the kind of sort of the limited sample size you saw from him this season. Next. Where is he? Here he is. Geno Smith. He's kind of a weird quarterback, it feels like. Statistically, he's put up some pretty solid numbers in Seattle, but again, eye test, it just feels like he's consistently inconsistent. He looks good one drive, or he'll look good one game, and look bad the next game, or look bad the next drive, and that's kind of just been his story with Seahawks. At least the past 2 seasons, he had a really good year his first year. At least the past 2 seasons, kind of some questionable play from him at times. A lot of Seahawks fans want him gone, from what I've seen on social media. Some fans want him, but a lot of people want him gone for them to just get a younger quarterback. Geno obviously getting up there in age. I believe he's in his early 30s, though. Maybe mid-30s, like 33, 34, something like. I think 34, I want to say. Not 100% sure on that. It feels like he's been in the league a lot longer. At least, like, maybe it feels like he's like 36, like 37 with how long he's been in the league, it feels like. But yeah, Geno, obviously he had a good amount of help. He had Metcalf, Lockett, who kind of disappeared the back half of the year. He might not even be back on the team next year. Their GM, John Schneider, literally came out and said, I don't know if he's going to be back on the team. Yeah, I mean, Ryan Grubb, I thought, was a pretty good OC, at least passing wise. Running, they, could not get a consistent running game. That's why they moved on from him. But passing, I think they were a pretty good team this year. Obviously, Geno, he got dinged up, I believe. I think he only missed the the later half of the later quarter of, fourth quarter. He got dinged up late against the Packers. Sam Howell, god awful, when he replaced him. So obviously a boost, and Geno's in there over Sam Howell. Again, super small sample size. Maybe you can argue Sam Howell would have looked better if he had, preparation time, knew he was going to be the starter. But sorry, excuse me here. You can argue the Packers weren't prepared for Howell, to counter argument to that. But anyway, my point is Geno Smith just consistently inconsistent this year. Look good one game, look bad the next game. Kind of like that the whole year, it felt like. I will say Geno Smith is clutch, it feels like. Down, they need a touchdown to win or tie the game. It feels like he always comes through in crunch time. Beat the Niners in a super clutch drive that I will never forget. That cost me a parlay. I was so pissed off. And it was right after I went to the game against the Rams we had this year, the Patriots. We lost that, so I was already pissed off we lost. And then I just needed the Niners to win the game for my parlay to hit, and Geno wins. And it felt like the Niners all played in that game, really should have had it. Then they realized I had their money line and decided to blow the game. So I was pissed off. But that was also the day that the Bills beat the Chiefs. So I didn't even give a shit at that point. I'd rather lose money than have the Chiefs win. So that was, that's okay, Geno. You're forgiven for that. But yeah, I don't want to get sidetracked here. Yeah, just consistently inconsistent for Geno. But I thought maybe you can interchange him and Tua, but maybe health plays a bit of a factor. Maybe that's unfair, but at least Geno was there. And again, players' health a lot of the time is out of their hands. 100% obviously you can do things to keep yourself, get ready to, keep your body healthier, prevent injuries less. I'm sure Tua, obviously takes all the effort to prevent injuries, but just been an issue for him, unfortunately. But Geno, even maybe health wise taken away, maybe health wise taken away. Tua played 17 games. I'd probably have him in front of Geno, but maybe the health factor plays a little bit that Geno played more. So I'm gonna have him in front of Tua. Okay, maybe not just health wise, maybe just eye test too. I thought Geno played better. I don't know. I'll just keep it the same. But Geno, again, solid year, but not phenomenal either, I don't think. Right in front of Geno. There he is. I have on. Okay, there we go. I have Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford, I've always respected, always thought he was a super underrated quarterback. Obviously, a large part of that is because he was at the Lions and they were god awful most of his years there. Always let him down, it felt like, I mean. Stafford statistically didn't light it up this year. However, he dealt with a lot of injuries with his receiving core. Kupp and Nacua missed a good amount of time. And they were 1-4 at one point. And then when they got those guys back, they only lost 2 games, I believe, after they got those guys back. And one of them, they benched their starters against the Seahawks the last week of the year, and they still nearly won. Jimmy G actually played a really solid game in that one. There's actually a report that came out today that said if they lose Stafford, they're comfortable with Jimmy G as their starters. That'll be interesting. I think Stafford will go back to the Rams if I had to guess, as I'm dying here with my voice. But who knows? Obviously he's not going to retire anymore. He was contemplating it, but he's obviously not going to anymore. But yeah, Stafford statistically didn't light it up, but I thought he had a pretty good year for the most part, especially with Kupp and Nacua back. The back half of the year, even though they were winning, Stafford kind of in the offense struggled, it felt like. And then they obviously lit the Vikings up in the wild card game. They lit the Bills up. But, he had multiple games towards the end of the year there where he had under 200 passing yards and they were like squeaking out wins. He didn't look too great. Yeah, and the games, they were all close. It wasn't like they were blowing their opponent out and they were just run heavy or anything like that. So yeah, Stafford kind of an up and down year, but I thought he played pretty good this year. Kind of an under the radar year, not great, not terrible by any means. Kind of just good, but not great for Stafford this year. Where is? Oh, here's my next guy. There we go. I have Brock Purdy just in front of Stafford. Maybe I honestly was kind of going back and forth on switching these guys, but Purdy actually. So obviously the Niners had a disaster of a year, but Purdy I thought actually played. Obviously this was I definitely think his worst year with the Niners, but I thought he played a decent year still. He dealt with a lot of injuries to his receiving core too. He dealt with the old Debo situation. Debo had a miserable year for the most part. Brandon Aiyuk really outside of that one game he had against who the hell was it? Oh God, early on, I forget, I'm blanking on who it was, and he had a good game, and then after that, he very much struggled. Obviously, he got hurt, missed most of the year. Kittle had a really good year. Their offensive line is kind of a mess this year. He had no run game whatsoever. He had about 500 different running backs. McCaffrey got hurt. He had a lot of injuries. Obviously, still is Shanahan, But I thought Purdy played a solid year. Statistically, he didn't light it up. And again, I definitely think this was the worst year, pretty easily that he's had with the Niners. I thought he had an under the radar kind of year. He's kind of a hard quarterback to rank. He certainly sparks a lot of debates among sports media. Even before this year, is Purdy elite? Is he not? In that argument, I would kind of go somewhere in the middle. I don't think Purdy is elite, but I don't think he's as bad as some people say he is. A lot of people argue that he's the Avengers. It's his teammates throwing the ball to. He is Kyle Shanahan calling plays. And the people arguing against are saying, and then you can say Shanahan took Jimmy G to the Super Bowl. They were good with Jimmy G. And then the people saying he's elite, citing the numbers, all the winning he's done. I would probably fair in the middle. Like, I think if, for example, if you put Purdy, let's just say the guy I have next to him, like on the Rams, I don't think Purdy is going to be good enough to, this past season make them like a juggernaut, like 13, 14 win team. I think they probably would have had similar results to how it played out this year with Stafford. They probably would have been around like a 10, 11-ish win team, something like that. Maybe 9, something like that. Uh, but my point is, I don't think Purdy's elite, but I don't think he's as bad as some people say he is. I don't think he's mid. I think he's between kind of maybe top 10 and like 16, somewhere in there. Maybe off to, I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll have to think about that one more exactly. I didn't really think about that too much going into this. Just kind of freely talking, like I do most of my videos. But yeah, Purdy, I don't think played awful this year, but again, definitely his worst year is the Niners starting quarterback. So a lot of the Purdy, maybe not haters, but certainly his haters, but a lot of the Purdy is an elite people. Yeah, Purdy is an elite people. Enjoyed this year for sure. The Niners and the offense struggling. Um, I think another way to put it is I think you could probably put any I don't know. We kind of saw with Jimmy G. You can put the not most talented quarterback in there, and they're going to have success offensively. Purdy, I think, is good enough to the point where you can put him on like a mid team, and they might make the playoffs. But I don't think they'll be competing for a Super Bowl. Maybe, and maybe the roster, the coaching's right. They can want to, things line up for them. They can. But if you put Purdy like on a god awful team, I don't think he's gonna like single-handedly transform them like someone like Tom Brady, for example. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. Like if Purdy was on the Jets this year, I think they'd have a similar result. But if he was on again the Rams, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think they'd have similar results than they had this year. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, Purdy I have here. Right in front of Purdy, I have Kyler. Kyler's kind of another weird quarterback. Kyler's a super fun, exciting player to watch. And I feel like he was kind of inconsistent, kind of like Geno, kind of inconsistently inconsistent. I don't think it was, he was as inconsistent as Geno was, but he had some games. He looked good one game, then the next game he looked bad. Uh, he had a game against the Seahawks late with the Cardinals were leading their division pretty late in the season, and it was like, are they really going to win their division? And then they had a big game late against the Seahawks. Well, they had 2 games late against the Seahawks, and the offense in Kyler did not play well at all. The second one, it was like, okay, I believe it was the second time in 3 weeks they were playing. They were at home, very much needed the game to keep their division hopes alive, and they put up a shitter. I think they scored in their opening drive. Then after that, they put up a complete shitter. Like week 1, they nearly beat the Bills. I don't think Kyler was great statistically, at least from what I remember in that game. Week 2, Kyler to Marvin Harrison looked like Brady to Moss in 07. Then, he had some games he didn't look great. He had some games he looked solid in. Just kind of consistency might have been an issue for this year for Kyler and company. I like Kyler, super exciting player to watch. But yeah, just I don't know, kind of the same thing with Geno, consistently inconsistent. It's gonna be interesting to see where the Cardinals go. But yeah, I have Kyler ranked here. Him and Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to certainly work on consistency, though. Um, in front of Kyler, I have Bo Nix. I would not have imagined I would have had Bo Nix this high going into the year. Or actually, hang on, did I miss someone here? Let me look at my. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, hang on, I missed a couple people here. I was looking at this list and I'm like, there's no way I had CJ Stroud this high. Okay, I actually had Stroud. All right, so all right, so let me move Bo Nix. I'll do him in a minute here. I had Stroud in between Geno and Tua. Oh boy. Stroud. I mean, the Texans offense, just Jesus. Their offense, the back half of the year, kind of even at the start of the year and was playing good. Just something I was saying it in my videos, something felt off. Even when they were 5-1, Stroud certainly regressed this year. They came out red hot to start the season, but just after that they declined, really hit a slump. Obviously, they had injuries. Diggs got hurt. Nico Collins got hurt. Their offense just declined. They did not look very great. Stroud had a lot of not so great throws and a lot of turnovers. Just didn't look too great. Certainly regressed. At least they looked god awful to start the playoff game against the Chargers. Then they kind of turned it on. I actually think he played solid against the Chiefs in the divisional round, even though their offense didn't put up a lot of points. I thought their offense in Sloak actually called a pretty good game, and their offense played a solid game. Protection. Obviously, protection was a major issue this year. Stroud was sacked a bunch. I think he was number 2, only to Caleb Williams. Excuse me here. Yeah, Stroud, sophomore slump maybe. I still like Stroud. I think he'll be fine next year. I'm blanking on who they promoted to OC. I want to say they promoted internally. Let me look it up to be sure. Um, okay, yeah, they promoted internally. Yeah. So their offense is going to be interesting next year. Are they going to re-sign Diggs? That's the question they'll have. But yeah, they got to certainly bolster that offensive line. Yeah, I think he'll be better next year than he was this past year. But yeah, Stroud just, the offense just not too great this year for the most part. But he had some bright moments. He had some clutch drives, had some good games, put up some, compared to his rookie year, not as great numbers, but still didn't put up god awful numbers. But I have him ranked here somewhere kind of in the middle of the pack. I think that's pretty fitting for the way Stroud played this year, at least in my opinion, in my eye test. Excuse me here. And take another sip of water. Something caught my throat. Okay, back to Bo Nix. So yeah, I would not have imagined putting Bo Nix this high going into the year. I mean, Bo Nix looked really good this year. I mean, their offense looked awful, and Bo Nix did not look good at all to start the year. But then it got better. The Broncos honestly were one of the better teams in the league for a good amount of time. If they would have beaten the Chiefs, I believe they would have been like 7-3 or something like that. Maybe something similar around that. Maybe 6-6 and I don't know, something I'm blanking, but somewhere around that record, which again they should have, but the Chiefs got the block field goal, of course. But yeah, Bo Nix, a lot of bright spots, had a lot of nice throws this season. You know, some accurate throws this season. Of course he had some throws where it's like, Jesus, like what are we doing here? He did have a decent amount of turnovers when I remember off the top of my head, but I'd like to see that cut down. But the Broncos, outside of Sutton, I mean, who the hell is Nix throwing to? And he still had a pretty good year. And the Broncos were expected to be bad this year. I hit them in the contention for the first overall pick. I think most people had the Broncos as one of the worst teams in the league this year. Their defense played a solid year. Their offense is much better than most people were expecting. Knicks look really good. A lot of optimism heading into year two, obviously. Um, but yeah, Knicks I thought played a really solid year. And again, of course, had some rookie moments, had some not so pretty throws, but I thought Knicks was pretty good this year. I was very impressed with Knicks. So I have him, pretty high up for a rookie in my rankings here. Actually, I forgot. I gotta go back here. I have Mahomes as the worst quarterback. I'm just kidding. I hate Mahomes, can't stand him. Just gonna make a joke at the start of my video and forgot. Who the hell do I? Oh, where is he? Where the hell? Oh, there he is. Jalen Hurts. There we go. I have Hurts in front of Knicks. And I joked, I called Jalen Hurts J mid Hurts. I've never been completely sold on Hurts as a passer. It's kind of just been one of my issues with him is he's consistently struggled to pass. Like if, you force Hurts to pass to win the game, like for, I don't know, if you're, okay, I shouldn't say that because he's proven he can do that. But if you force Hurts to, how do I phrase this? Like if he is down, just needs to go pass, 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 win the game. Without the Avengers, I have a tough time seeing it's going to happen unless the defense like blows it. For example, like week 3 against the Saints, he's going to need to pass to win the game, and very rough start to the drive, and then just a simple crossing route that any quarterback can make. He throws it, and the coverage gets blown. They end up getting a touchdown shortly later. I don't mean to just shit on Hurts. Obviously, he balled out in the Super Bowl. He played great in both Super Bowls he's been in. He had a really good Super Bowl, one Super Bowl MVP. This past Super Bowl, they, kind of shut down Saquon for the most part. The Chiefs did. Made Hurts pass. That's exactly what he did. To win the game, I mean. And I guess Hurts, a lot of knock on Hurts for not being able to consistently pass, put up big passing numbers. Sorry, I'm looking at my phone here. Just got like 40 notification. Yeah, the knock on Hurts is, he's consistently struggled to put up big passing numbers, week to week. They were dead last in the league in passing attempts this year. The Eagles were. So, obviously he's not going to have big passing numbers if, that's the case. They're dead last in pass attempts. And why is that? Because of Saquon and company in the run game. Obviously, Hurts is really good scrambling too. But even though he balled out in the Super Bowl, I'm still not sold on Hurts as being a consistent passer. One thing he does do well, he delivers a really nice deep ball. It feels like every deep pass that A.J. Brown has got. Devontae Smith, he has some nice deep passes too. He throws a really good deep ball. I will give him that. But still, I'm not consistently sold on Hurts as, being able to consistently pass. I've said consistently so many times. Consistently pass, week to week, things like that. And again, you can say he's done it, but look at his team. He has a God squad. He has A.J. Brown, he's got Smith, he's got Goddard, he has a God tier offensive line. He's had nothing but good offensive coordinators. So yeah, I mean that's the argument against it. Like if you put Hurts on it, for example, if you put Hurts on the Broncos, I think they would have been a disaster this year. Because would Hurts have put up big passing numbers with the Broncos receiving core? No, I don't think so. He would have probably had more of a chance to do so because obviously the Broncos run game is worse than the Eagles. But anyway, I don't even know what the hell I'm saying anymore. I'm getting off topic here. Hurts, I thought played solid this year, but I wasn't too impressed because I honestly don't think he did a lot that most quarterbacks couldn't. I just thought the run game really carried their team this year. Hurts didn't light it up passing. He had some games he played really well against, like for example, against the Steelers. He had a really good passing game. He had some good passing games this year, but again, I think you probably could have plugged in any at least mid quarterback and their offense would have been good. I mean, we even saw it with Hurts is out a couple games. We saw Kenny Pickett, and we saw why the hell am I blanking on their backup's name? The rookie backup that looked pretty good. Why am I blanking on his name? All right, yep. Now I gotta look this up. What I want to say Tanner McKee, but I want to be 100% sure. Um, Let me make sure here. Um, Come on. Uh, Let me make sure. Okay, yeah, Tanner McKee. I mean, we saw Tanner McKee. I mean, Tanner McKee friggin' lit, again, very limited sample size, but he lit it up when he came in the game. Kenny Pickett played pretty solid too. So we've seen. My point is, Hurts played good this year, but I don't think he did anything most quarterbacks couldn't. But again, I'm just shitting on Hurts. I don't mean it to sound like that. Was very impressed with his performance in the Super Bowl, but still not sold. I'm going to need to see more as a consistent passer for me to be completely sold on Hurts. But I thought Hurts played good this year. Obviously, I have him, ahead of everyone I do on this list. But yeah, again, not thoroughly impressed with Hurts this year. And he had, passing the start of the year before the Eagles really found their groove. Hurts did not look too great. He was turning the ball over a good amount, and then he cleaned it up, finished with a good touchdown to pick ratio. A lot of his rushing touchdowns are just from the tush push. Hurts gets a lot of hate. Some of it justified, some of it not justified, I think. But I still have him pretty high up. I think he'll probably. I guess I want to say he'll only get better, but again, I don't know. Hurts is a winner if you just look at stats, but I'm still not completely sold on him, at least to me. Maybe I'm a hater. I don't know. Right in front of Hurts, I have Jesus. Come on, there we go. Jordan Love. And I went back and forth on those two guys. I originally had Hurts in front of Love, and I changed it multiple times, but I settled with Love in front of Hurts. And why is that? I kind of mentioned it earlier. I didn't think Hurts did a lot that most quarterbacks couldn't. Like if you had Jordan Love on the Eagles, I think they had the same amount of success they had this season, for example. Um, and maybe you can knock that argument saying, well, Malik Willis, he subbed in for Jordan Love, and they looked really good under Malik Willis. So maybe you can counter with that. Would they have been able to do that consistently? I don't think so, but who knows? Jordan Love was super up and down this year. He was hurt for a good amount of the year. He looked kind of a consistency thing with him again. He looked good through parts of the year. He looked bad through parts of the year. But the parts he didn't look great in, I think he was injured, not 100%. When he was healthy, I thought he looked pretty good this year. Kind of like the year prior, as the year progressed, got later and later, it looked like the Packers and Jordan Love were heating up. That playoff game obviously didn't play very good against Philly. I mean, and then again, going back to the receiving core, I mean, who the hell is Jordan Love throwing the ball to? I mean, the Packers have a lot of good young pieces at receiver. They don't have that true number one. So, I'd like to see Jordan Love with a receiving core, like that Jalen Hurts has to see the numbers he can put up. And again, it kind of goes against the point where you can't really knock the player for the support they get, but it's something to factor in, I think. But yeah, Jordan Love kind of up and down this year, but I thought for the most part when he was healthy, he played good. I think he'll, just get better and better too, even though he's only started for what 2 full seasons now. He's been in the league a lot longer than that. Obviously, he sat behind Rodgers for a couple of years. But yeah, I'm optimistic about Jordan Love. I have him pretty high up on my list here. Oh boy. Well, my list is probably already controversial, but this is probably when it starts to get very controversial. And again, I just want to preface this is solely based off the 2024 season, how I evaluate and think all these quarterbacks performed. I have Mahomes this low. Not impressed at all with Mahomes this season. I call him mid Holmes. I think he's been mid for 2 seasons now and has gotten completely carried by his defense. I mean, we saw it. Sorry, I just got a funny text. I mean, we just saw in the Super Bowl what happened with the Chiefs. Again, I don't mean to go on a rant here. I believe the Chiefs had the single luckiest season in the history of sports. All the black magic things that they got to go their way, and someone I saw in a video I was watching earlier put it in a good way. It's not saying Chiefs didn't deserve to win those games that they did, but it was like a lot of them came down to 50-50 coin toss calls, and they were on the benefiting side of nearly, not even nearly, literally every single one of them. And so I'll just say a lot of their wins were from pure luck, I believe. The Raiders, the Chargers, maybe less so because the field goal was more inside, but it still bounced off the upright in. The Bengals questionable flag there, week one. Isaiah Likely being out of bounds by an inch. The Rams would have gone for two. Who knows? Maybe the Chiefs would have stopped them. And Lamar missed a Flowers wide open prior to that too. Against the Bucs, they win the coin toss. Yeah, I mean, the Texans get momentum. They're about to tie the game. Tank Dell gets hurt. Their momentum goes away. I mean, just all the black magic things the Chiefs got this season. I mentioned the Raiders, the bobbled snap too. I think at least. The Falcons game, the PI call, and again, you can go through a list of every team, but the Chiefs, I've never seen it at a level. The amount of things they got to go their way is just absolutely insane. This season. But yeah, Mahomes, again, I was not impressed with him the past 2 seasons. I think he's been mid the past 2 seasons. I call him mid Holmes. I mean, we even saw a game this year when they were undefeated still. They played the Niners. Mahomes had like I want to say like a 39 or 40 or maybe early 50s passer rating. They still won by more than one score. I mean, if that's not getting carried, I don't know what is. And I think he had a touchdown pass that was at the ones that his pass rating would have been bolstered if that happened. But I think it was even just a simple pop pass that literally, I mean, I think even I can do, not even as a player, obviously. Um, yeah, my point is just not too impressed with Mahomes. Statistically, Mahomes did not have a good year this year or last year. Mid numbers 2 years in a row from Mahomes. I mean, he even talked about it. He was saying he didn't play up to his standards this year. I don't think he said he was struggling, but he just wasn't playing too great. And of course, players are always going to say that, even if they are playing great. But you know, so okay, so I guess I kind of just knocked my argument point out there. But yeah, I think 2 years in a row now, actually statistics support this. 2 years in a row now, their defense has been better than their offense. 2 years ago, they had the second ranked defense, if I remember right. I want to say they had, I want to say, I forget what their offense rank was. I want to say like the 13th ranked offense 2 years ago. I know for a fact, though, this past season, I believe their defense was ranked ninth, and they had the 16th ranked offense. And you take away the luck and the black magic, and look what happens. We saw it in the Super Bowl. That is the team that they would have been this year if they didn't get all the black magic to go their way. Um, but yeah, Mahomes, and again, you can say the help argument. Obviously, Rashee Rice got knocked out early, which was on an interception by Mahomes. Mahomes knocked him out himself on the tackle. Obviously not purposeful, but Kelce washed. Mahomes, that Niners game I mentioned, there was a couple games where he was throwing to like just Jesus, like barely, guys people know their names of. Um, but still, I mean, they traded for Hopkins. Hollywood Brown came back late in the year. They got Kareem Hunt back. The run game got a bit revitalized with Hunt back. Um, so I mean, by the end of the year, I will say after their black magic maybe not ended, but toned down a bit. Like really, from that Cleveland game on, they got less lucky and they were just winning more decisively. It felt like they looked like a better team than they did prior to that. Um, but I don't know what to say. I'm getting off topic here. My point is Mahomes. I think he's been mid 2 seasons now. Not impressed with him this year. He didn't play god awful by any means. I just thought he was super mid the past 2 years. I think you can plug probably any quarterback past. Let's see here. Um, uh, I think okay, maybe not. I think you can plug most of these quarterbacks, certainly the ones I have left on my list here that I haven't put on my chart yet. But I think you can plug most of these quarterbacks that I have ranked into the Chiefs the past 2 years, and they have similar success. Yes, Mahomes has made an elite play from time to time that's, given them momentum and helped them win the game. But I, again, not impressed with Mahomes and their offense for 2 seasons in a row now. I hate Mahomes. Maybe it's some bias. I think he's the most overrated player in the history of sports by a landslide. But yeah, I mean the media, most sports fans just talking about, how Mahomes was struggling this year, not playing too great. It's even figured out. Even last year too, and they won the Super Bowl. They came close this year. Fortunately, the Eagles saved us. Um, but yeah, I think again, and Mahomes, I'm just shitting on him here. Again, he didn't play god awful. I have him ahead of all these quarterbacks, but I truly believe the quarterbacks I have left that I haven't ranked played better this season than Mahomes. I think at most you can probably argue. I debated Mahomes Herbert for a bit, but I gave Herbert a slight edge. I mean, certainly you cannot argue Allen and Lamar played worse than Mahomes. Burrow, yeah, I don't think you can argue that. Maybe you can argue Baker, Goff, Darnold, Daniels. I don't think you can. Maybe you can argue those guys, but I feel fairly comfortable saying the guys I have not ranked all played better than Mahomes this season. And again, purely based off this season. It's not a list of who I would rather have at quarterback going, forward or anything like that. It's just purely based off this past season, how I assess and evaluate the quarterback play. Just not impressed with Mahomes this or last season, which is why I have him kind of low. Most people have him probably in the top 5. I think at the highest people probably have him as 4, because I don't think you can make an argument. Again, Burrow, Allen, or Lamar played worse than Mahomes this past season. Anyway, slightly ahead of Mahomes, I have Herbert. And again, this is probably controversial. I debated Herbert and Mahomes. Again, the help factor. Mahomes, again, didn't have too much of a receiving core. But again, he still had Kelce the whole year. That alone is better than the weapons Herbert had, except McConkey. I think McConkey probably played better than Kelce this year, but he's a rookie. I mean, Herbert's, most of his passing offense was a rookie in Ladd McConkey this year. And I love Ladd McConkey. Really was impressed that I saw from him this year. But I mean, Herbert is throwing to guys like Josh Palmer as his number 2 receiver. Josh Palmer is like a number 3 or 4, like not a number 2. Well, I guess Quentin Johnson was the number 2, but Quentin Johnson had a disastrous rookie year. He played a lot better this year, but my point is Mahomes had a better supporting cast than Herbert this year, I think. And Herbert, I mean, again, you don't want to base stats off everything, but statistically, Herbert had a pretty good year too. I think he had 20 touchdowns, 3 picks, something like that. And again, my eye test, you can go back and forth on these guys. I'm not going to argue that you put Mahomes ahead of Herbert. I'd be fine with that. But I simply think Herbert had a better year than Mahomes, maybe marginally, but at least to my eye test. So yeah, that's why I have Herbert there. Ahead of Herbert, I have okay, there we go. I have Jane Daniels ahead of Herbert. Jesus Christ, I'm dying. Sorry, people. My Mahomes rant. I was so excited to put Mahomes that low. But yeah, Jane Daniels obviously balled out this year. Had an absolute hell of a year. I mean, he overexceeded, I think, most people's expectations. Going into the year, some people had Washington as a sleeper team. Some people had them winning the division. Well, not some. Very few, I believe. A lot of people were optimistic on Washington. A good amount of people like me, for example, were lower on Washington, thought they could be a sleeper team, but thought they would be one of the lesser teams. I believe I had Washington at like 5 wins, somewhere around there. Um, but yeah, obviously overachieved expectations, balled out this year. Maybe the one knock against Jane Daniels, and I mentioned it in my videos, he didn't necessarily light it up passing wise. Just passing numbers, kind of similar to Hurts. But rushing, he had a really good rushing year too. Yeah, but passing, he played good. On paper, the I nearly just said the Redskins. Nearly said the Redskins. The Commanders. God, how awful of me to say the Redskins. The Commanders. Sorry, I'm getting text here. The Commanders, on paper, I think had one of the weaker rosters, and again, from at least on paper, overachieved expectations. Obviously Daniels is McLaurin. Um, they traded Jahan Dotson to Philly before the year. It's like, Jesus, like, who is Jane Daniels going to throw to outside of McLaurin? So maybe one of the weaker receiving cores. Zach Ertz, tight end one. Obviously, he's very much up there in age. He had a very productive year. But yeah, Jane Daniels in the offense far exceeded expectations. See, hmm, okay, I was going to spoil who I have next, but I'll talk about that in a second here. Um, just trying to phrase what I was talking about with Jane Daniels here. Yeah, Jane Daniels to me just I think he had a better year than all these guys, obviously, which is why I have him ahead of these guys. My list here just overexceeded expectations. Very impressed, but I believe out of the guys I have left, he maybe slightly was outdone by them. I think it's a decent way to put it. But again, definitely I think out of the guys remaining here, the weakest, supporting cast, and he very much overproduced, had a hell of a year. Probably only going to get better. You can only hope, at least. Very optimistic about Washington. Definitely can make noise next year. So credit to Jane Daniels and company. Um, yeah, for the year they put together. Super high on Jane Daniels. Very impressed with what I saw from him this year. Right in front of Jane Dan. No, okay. Okay, now my list is really messed up. I need another sip of water here. Jesus. Okay, here we go. Right in front of Jane Daniels, I have Baker Mayfield. Now, this is, I mean, most people, maybe not most people, but I think most, maybe a majority. It might be a slight majority. I think a majority of people would have Daniels over Mayfield. I wouldn't argue against if you did. But to me, I thought Baker had a very under the radar year. He certainly had a streak where he was a bit turnover heavy. But Baker was just consistent most of this year. I mean, he talked about injuries. I mean, obviously Godwin was down. He was on pace to have a career year. He went down. Mike Evans missed a couple games. And some of the guys Baker was throwing to, it's like, who the hell are these guys outside of Otton? He's people kind of been recognizing him a bit more, but like Sterling Shepard, for example, it's like, oh, some people were like, Jesus, I forgot he's even in the league. He's actually a very underrated receiver. But yeah, I mean, for a good amount of the time this year, I mean, Mayfield very much, was dealing with injuries to his receiving core. He put up 40 plus touchdowns. How many picks did he have? I want to say like 12. This is gonna bother me. Let me see here. Okay, 16. But yeah, he had 106.8 passer rating. So that's obviously very good. His defense was not too great this year. It, stiffened up, got better kind of towards the end of the year, but his defense was pretty injured this year. The Bucs had one of the top offenses, and they were very much plagued with injuries. I think it's a good way to put it. And again, he might have been turnover heavy at times. I was very impressed with Baker this year. The reason I have him in front of Jane Daniels is I kind of mentioned it. Jane Daniels had some games where he didn't light it up statistically, passing and rushing, but the Commanders were winning anyway. It felt like a Baker kind of had a subpar game. They lost. At least off the top of my head, I don't know if statistics win loss, things like that support that notion. But at least off the top of my head, it feels like that to me at least. So again, they're kind of interchangeable. If you put Daniels ahead of Mayfield, not going to argue against you. Certainly a valid, ranking, my opinion. But I have Mayfield slightly ahead of Daniels here. Um, in front of Baker, excuse me, I have Sam Darnold. Would never, kind of like Bo Nix, I would never have imagined putting Sam Darnold this high up on my list going into the year. And I went back and forth on Baker and Sam Darnold too. Um, I think I originally had Baker in front of Sam Darnold, but I switched it to Sam Darnold in front of Baker. Um, Honestly, I'm so back and forth, and then maybe as I'm talking about it here, I'll convince myself to switch him back, flip flop him here. But yeah, Darnold obviously had a hell of a year. Okay, so outside of the Jags game, he played bad in, and I want to say he played pretty poorly in another game. He played very consistently well this year, put up very good numbers, except the last two games against Detroit and against the Rams. Darnold played awful. The team played pretty awful. Those games too. But Darnold played awful those two games, and the stakes were highest. Maybe you take that into consideration too. But then you can say Baker against the playoff game against the Commanders there. I certainly don't think it's Baker's fault they lost that game, but Baker, made some mistakes late. That fumble, Baker took the blame for it. That was a big part of why the Commanders were able to win at the end there. I don't think Baker choked as bad as Darnold, but maybe you can counter saying, suggesting that, if you want to say Baker's better than Darnold, should be ahead of Darnold here. Two former Panthers quarterbacks this high up. Jesus. Who would imagine that a couple years ago? But yeah, Darnold just balled out, consistent good numbers this year. Not that this necessarily took, factor into why I have Darnold ahead of Mayfield, but Darnold has been, I'll just say it, he's been awful pretty much his whole career until this year. So obviously a major bump up. Maybe you can argue it was a fluke year. He was in a super friendly quarterback system, but still a significant jump up from, the level and, the numbers he was putting up in his career and the level he was performing at to now, major jump. I mean, the Vikings won 14 games. And again, I mean, Darnold had Jefferson, and then Hawkinson didn't come back till late. He had, Jordan Addison too. So pretty good receiving core. Kevin O'Connell, super, super underrated head coach. His defense was certainly better than Baker's. They put up some pretty similar numbers, if I remember. I think Baker definitely threw more touchdowns. Let me just double check here. I want to say they were like points off each other passer rating wise. So yeah, statistically, if you look at it, Baker had a better year. Yeah, okay, so Baker had about 200 more pass yards, about his pass rating was about 4 points higher. He had 6 more touchdowns, but he also had 4 more picks than Darnold. So yeah, very close stats wise, but to me, eye test, Baker had a couple games just too turnover heavy. He didn't play too great in a couple of them. Made some, some bad throws. Darnold certainly had that this year. I mentioned that Jags game, for example, that Lions game the last week of the year, but maybe a bit less of that. And, razor thin margin, but I'm going to give Darnold a very slight edge in my rankings here. Very impressed with Darnold this year. What's going to happen with him? Who the hell knows? That is something I'm very interested in this offseason. Before Darnold, I have Jared Goff. Now, Jared Goff, the start of the year, the Lions offense was kind of very very suspect. It wasn't, it was putting up, yards and points, but, it was not to the extent we were expecting it to compared to the year prior. And then they hit a groove and they were just lighting absolutely everybody up. They were putting up, they put up 50 multiple times. They put up 40 multiple times. I mean, they were just absolutely insane. And, you take away, those first couple weeks where Goff wasn't too great, with the exception of that Houston game where what did Goff have? I want to say freaking 5 turnovers, if I remember right. Let me double check here. Um, I want to say Goff had 5 turnovers. Let me make sure before I say that for sure. Yeah, Goff had 5 picks in that game, and they still won. Obviously, a large part of that is because of the defense. Goff obviously didn't play great that game. He turned the ball over 5 times, but he was clutch late. He came back late, played pretty good late. Um, but yeah, Goff just consistently, and there were some games where Goff didn't, he didn't light it up statistically, and they still won big. So you can argue again, if you don't want to put Goff aside, that can be your argument. I've argued that point for some of the guys here for my rankings, but yeah, Goff. I mean, and obviously he had a lot of help too. Really good offensive line. Ben Johnson, the hot head coaching candidate everyone wanted. Pause. Um, he had Amon Ra. I much said he had Hawkinson. Used to have Hawkinson until they traded them traded him to the Vikings there. He is Sam Laporta. Kind of had a regression, a bit of a year, but that might have been expected. All the touchdowns he got his rookie year. Is that really going to transfer over to this year? Jameson Williams took a big step up this year. Obviously, the run game was insane, but Goff was just really consistently good to me this year. Very impressed. Even if he didn't light it up statistically, he played very well. There were some games he's putting up big pass numbers week to week. The Lions, I believe they were the number one offense this year, and obviously Goff was their quarterback, so he deserves a good amount of credit for that. It was very impressive with Goff. He just had less kind of questionable throws and kind of oh geez games, maybe not games, but moments than I think Baker and Darnold, which is why I have him ranked in front of those guys. But yeah, very impressed with Goff this year. I just don't think he was better than the 3 guys I have left. Okay, so let me take a sip of water here. Okay. All right, so this is when it's gonna get well, I'm sure my list is already controversial. Some people are probably thinking I'm an idiot. Some of my rankings already here. This is probably when it starts to get very controversial. So at number 3, so first of all, if you want to make an argument, any of these guys in any combination, 1, 2, 3, say Lamar's one, I'm not going to argue. Say Burrow's one, I'm not going to argue. If you say Allen's one, I'm not going to argue. And 2 and 3, same thing. I honestly think they're close to interchangeable. You can make a solid argument that I would probably agree with for any of these 3 guys being ranked number 1. However, again, in my opinion, and solely based off this past season, I, excuse me, as I'm dying, am going to put at number 3 Josh Allen. And yes, I know Josh Allen won the MVP. I personally believe out of him and Lamar, it should have been Lamar. I think Lamar, and again, I'm not going to argue that Josh Allen shouldn't have won it. Well, I mean, I am, but I'm fine with Josh Allen winning. I think he was more than deserving of it. I think he should have won it the year prior when Lamar did win it. So I think it kind of evens out that he won it this year, and I think Lamar was probably more deserving. Um, but yeah, I think Lamar should have won it this year. Between the two of them. But Josh Allen obviously played phenomenal this year. I just think Lamar simply okay. Okay, how do I phrase this? I just think okay. I'm trying to phrase this without spoiling what I have as my number 2 and number 1 quarterback here. Again, it's interchangeable. You can put any of these guys 1, 2, 3 in any combination, and it'll be valid. But I just think I think Burrow and Allen, or sorry, Burrow and Lamar slightly had better seasons than Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a couple games where it was kind of like he didn't play too great and they won still, most of them. I certainly don't think that's the case with Burrow. If Burrow played subpar, they're almost 100% guaranteed to lose this season. And Lamar kind of had some games where he didn't play too great and they were able to win, but most of the games he played great. Again, most of the games Allen played, he played phenomenal. But statistically, and again, I don't want to base off everything off stats. I think Lamar, and again, this is mostly based off my eye test. I think Lamar simply was better than Josh Allen this year. And again, I think Josh Allen's phenomenal. I know he won the MVP. I don't mean to, take away from that, but I just think Lamar had a better year. than Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow too. Um, yeah, and you can argue that out of Burrow and Lamar, Josh Allen had a less receiving core. The Bills, I don't think, I don't, how do I phrase this? I don't think most people expected them to be as dominant as they were this year. I think most people expected them to be good, but not, as good as they were. Kind of a bit of a maybe down year for them, but still certainly make the playoffs, contend for the Super Bowl, but probably not make it there. They performed better and they got closer to the Super Bowl than I think most people were expecting them to going into the year. They lost Diggs. People, no superstar wide receiver. I think people expected Allen in the offense to take a step down, and they didn't. Their offense is very good this year. Again, Josh Allen obviously played very good this year. I just simply think Joe Burrow and Lamar, according to my eyes, my eye test, had better years than Josh Allen. So, who do I think had the better year and was the best quarterback this year between Burrow and Lamar? Oh boy, this is when it's going to start to get controversial. Well, it is already. This is when it's going to get very controversial. I have Lamar as number two. I have Lamar as number two. Obviously, that means I have Burrow as number one. Now, yes, again, most people probably have Burrow as either number two or number three. Most people probably have him as number three behind Lamar and Josh Allen. And Lamar and Josh Allen, you can swap them. It's kind of like close to 50-50. The people having Lamar and Josh Allen at number one in their rankings. Again, I just kind of mentioned I think Lamar had a better year than Josh Allen, just eye test wise. However, the reason I'm putting Joe Burrow at number one, my eye test, I simply think he was the best quarterback in the league this year. And again, I mentioned supporting cast. Now, obviously, from a receiving core, Joe Burrow has the most help. He has Jamar, he's got Tee Higgins, Mike Gesicki had a super under the radar year. Where was that when he was with the Patriots? The year prior. Who the hell knows? Obviously, he's got a lot of help offensively that these guys might not, even though Lamar and Derrick Henry. However, Joe Burrow's defense was so god awful this year, and I mentioned it. If Joe Burrow played subpar, or if he didn't have a phenomenal game, they're guaranteed to lose. The only game I don't think Joe Burrow played phenomenal in, and they lost, and they won, sorry, was Week 18 against the Steelers. And Joe Burrow started the game very well, but the second half, they after they lost Tee Higgins due to injury, their offense kind of struggled after that. Their defense, as ironic as it was, their defense kept their season alive. They held the Steelers to turnover on downs, which turnover on downs, keep their season alive. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs. The Broncos slaughtered the Chiefs to end the Bengals' playoff hopes. But, I mean, the Bengals' offense was just absolutely insane this year. Statistically, I want to say the Ravens' offense might have been better. I believe that was the case. Actually, maybe the Ravens, I believe it was the Lions had the top offense. Maybe it was the Ravens. I'm not 100% sure. I think it was the Lions. Not 100% sure on that, though. But the Bengals, their offense just, I mean, Burrow just had to be near perfect for them to stand a chance. Every week he's putting up insane numbers, and they lost most of those games, so they went on a win streak at the end of the year because their defense was so god awful. I mean, we saw. When the Ravens and Bengals played, both times. The first time, both times it was a shootout, and simply Lamar made maybe one or two less mistakes than Burrow, and they won the game. And that's the NFL, tight margin. Just a play can make a difference. But Joe Burrow's defense is so bad that he needed to be perfect. He turned it over late. They lost because of it. And they still should have won that game, by the way. McPherson can make that kick. But again, maybe you can argue that they were only in position because, the Ravens fumbled it there. There's kind of a fluke play there with the fumble. I think if I remember right, Lamar just bobbled the snap. But yeah, Joe Burrow to me is just I don't know. Controversial. Most people don't have him at one, but to me, he had a slightly better season than Lamar and Josh Allen. And again, part of that is just because he had to be perfect, put up monster numbers every week, or else they lose. Lamar and Josh Allen had a few games where they didn't have to put up good numbers and they could win. And again, maybe you don't want to argue and take that away from them, use that as an argument point against them. Maybe you can say, well, if they had to put up monster numbers, they could have. They just didn't had to. So you don't want to knock them for that. That's what I'm trying to say here. But I don't know. Just my eye test told me Joe Burrow. And again, I'm in my awards predictions video. I think I mentioned I think I would have picked Lamar for MVP. What I should have said was if I had a vote, I would have picked Burrow, but I knew he wasn't going to win it. It was either going to be Lamar or Josh Allen. So I said I would pick Lamar, just assuming it's between the two of them. If I was a voter, I would have voted for Joe Burrow to win MVP. And I'm a Joe Burrow fan, but I don't think it's me being biased here. And again, if you want to say Lamar's number one, Josh Allen's number one, if you want to say Joe Burrow's number three, he's less than these two guys. I'm not going to, this season at least, I'm not going to argue against you. I'm sure, it's a very valid case. I I kind of was, fairly comfortable with putting Burrow against or ahead of Josh Allen. And again, Josh Allen won MVP, so I might sound like an idiot saying that. But I was kind of back and forth on Lamar and Burrow. I had Burrow ahead of Lamar, and then I thought about it a bit more. I'm like, maybe I'll switch it. I'm like, I'm going to leave Burrow at number one. I mean, statistically, Lamar outplayed both these guys. He had, I think I think he had more touchdowns. I know he certainly had more than Josh Allen. Did he have more than Burrow? Um, okay, I think Burrow, I think, had two more, I want to say, two touchdowns. And Lamar, however, I think he had five less picks. So obviously, you'll take that ratio. You'll take five less interceptions than two more touchdowns, probably. But Burrow, he almost had 5,000 passing yards. This was probably the best year of Joe Burrow's career. Uh, unfortunately, and it was just ruined because his defense was so god awful. I mean, they put up 30, they lost, I think, 5 games and they put up 30 plus. It's like the only time in NFL history that's happened. Their defense is just so god awful this year. Just Joe Burrow just had to be perfect almost to win games. And, he wasn't perfect and they lost. They had to at least score a touchdown or a field goal, a touchdown most drives because it feels like their defense is letting up points nearly every single drive. Week one, obviously their defense played good enough to win against my team, the Patriots. Joe Burrow and coming in play very good. That's kind of the one exception. Week two, their defense actually didn't play too bad against the Chiefs either. But from that point on, up until I honestly probably week 18, it felt, and maybe against the Broncos, their defense played good enough to win the game by themselves, but well, not by themselves. No unit can win the game by themselves, but you guys know what I mean, hopefully. But late in that game, it felt like they were getting torched. Although in overtime, they did force two punts on the Broncos. So I guess the defense did their part that game. But pretty much from week 3 on to maybe that Broncos game, it felt like maybe the Titans game too is an exception. It felt like if the Bengals offense is not perfect, they lose. And Joe Burrow, I think not single-handedly, but was a major factor in why they won a majority of their games because he played at such an elite high level. And again, even though Lamar, I think statistically might have played better than Burrow, maybe marginally, my eye test, I'm putting Burrow at number one. And again, I don't want to knock Lamar and Josh Allen, but it just felt like there was games where, they didn't need to do too much and they ended up winning the game. They didn't light it up stats wise, they could win the game. If that happened with Burrow, he didn't light up stats wise, they lose. Again, with the exception of maybe week 1 and week 2, and maybe the last 2 games. But outside of those 4 games, if Burrow did not play near perfect, they lose, and they still went 9-8 and nearly made the playoffs. I really wish they would have made the playoffs. But yeah, sorry, I've been talking for a while, so my friggin' throat's dying over here. But yeah, I'm gonna make sure I got my list right from everything I wrote down before I end the video here. Love hurts. I'm just double checking here. Um, Carr, T.Y., Daniel Jones, Levis, Richardson. Okay, so yeah, I got my list right. Okay, yeah, so this was a different type of video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Definitely am making a bunch of off-season content. I think my next video is either going to be looking back at my preseason predictions, which, God, I'm going to look like an idiot when I show them on the screen here. Some of them, at least. Some of them I got half decent right, but half decently right. But some of them, I'm like, Jesus, what the hell was I thinking? And then I'm gonna do kind of a tiers list like this one, like how each team lived up to their expectations. They achieve, underachieve, just achieve, subpar, things like that. A couple video topics I have, so be on the lookout for that. Hopefully this list, let me know your guys' thoughts if you agree, disagree. Certainly I'm sure the top three is gonna get slandered. Mahomes being that low probably will get slandered. Otherwise than that, I feel like, it's pretty everyone is gonna be kind of on the same page. It's definitely some of them are interchangeable along the list here. But I feel like, this list is pretty like I don't think, for example, I okay, if how do I phrase this? I don't think this list is controversial to the point where like I have someone in one position that's like five or like six ranks, something or more like off, for example. Like if you have someone that you think should be ahead of someone, maybe like two or three slots, maybe one, but I don't think much beyond that. I think it should be similar to most people's bracket, or not brackets, ranks. Maybe outside of the top three, and maybe Mahomes being that low. And again, maybe you can swap like Richardson, Levis for a spot, May, Rogers, to a stretch, Wilson to a things like that. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. I will end the video here. Be on the lookout for my videos I plan on recording and uploading shortly. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Have a good one. Take it easy, guys.